I bet I could kiss an alien vampire. Now her mother and sisters demand I be her mate. The night was heavy with silence, and the forest around the crash site looked like it belonged to another world. The human, tired and wounded, forced himself to keep walking. His ship had gone down hours ago, and his only chance of survival was to find shelter before the predators of this strange planet found him. The air was cold and wet, carrying a scent of earth and something sweet he could not name. It made his skin crawl, as if invisible eyes were following his every step. He stopped often listening, but only the soft rustle of leaves answered him. He thought he was alone until he saw the light. A soft blue glow shimmered between the trees, moving as if it belonged to a living thing. His heart raced, but he moved closer, unable to resist. The glow grew brighter, and soon a figure emerged from the mist. She was taller than he expected, her skin pale like moonlight, her eyes glowing red in the dark. Her hair, black as shadow, fell over her shoulders. When she opened her mouth, he saw the sharp points of her fangs. His instincts screamed at him to run, yet his legs refused to move. The creature looked at him with curiosity instead of hunger. She tilted her head, studying him as if he were some rare animal. For a moment, the human forgot the danger. There was something fragile about her, hidden beneath her deadly appearance. He tried to steady his breathing, his mind racing for words. He thought she would attack. But instead, she whispered in a soft voice that echoed through the trees. She spoke his language, though broken and strange, as if she had learned it long ago. "Human," she said, her voice both sharp and gentle. "You are not afraid?" He should have lied, but instead he laughed nervously. His body shook with fear, yet his lips curved in a defiant smile. "I bet I could kiss you," he said without thinking. The words slipped out, half a joke, half a desperate shield against the terror he felt. Her eyes widened, the glow in them brightening. For a long moment she stood frozen, her lips parting slightly as if no one had ever spoken to her like that before. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her pale face. The forest grew colder. The human realized they were not alone. Shadows moved between the trees, low whispers curling in the air like smoke. More eyes watched him now, dozens of them glowing faintly red. The girl turned her head slightly as if warning him to stay quiet, but the human's heart pounded too loud for silence. He wanted to step back, but her gaze held him still. She came closer. He could see the faint lines of veins beneath her skin, glowing faintly with the same blue light that had drawn him to her. Her hand lifted slowly as if she meant to touch him, but then stopped halfway. She seemed afraid of her own action, her own desire. The human could feel the tension, the strange connection pulling them together. He did not know why he had said those words, but now they hung between them like a dangerous promise. "Why?" she asked him, her voice trembling, almost human. "Why would you say this to me?" He swallowed hard, trying to find an answer. "Because you do not look like a monster to me." The words surprised even him. He expected her to laugh or to strike him down, but instead her expression softened, the glow in her eyes dimming. For the first time, she looked less like a predator and more like a lonely soul in a forest of shadows. The whispers around them grew louder. The human could feel the weight of the hidden watchers pressing against him, a silent judgment waiting to fall. The girl's smile faded, replaced by worry. She stepped back quickly, her gaze darting through the trees. Her lips moved as if speaking words he could not hear, words not meant for human ears. The forest seemed to breathe with her, alive and watching. Suddenly, the ground trembled with a low rumble. The human stumbled, grabbing a tree for balance. From the darkness came a sound, a growl so deep it shook the air. He realized too late that the glowing eyes did not belong only to her kind. Something else was moving, something larger, heavier, older. The girl stepped in front of him, her pale arms raised, her voice sharp as she shouted in her own tongue. The shadows recoiled, but the growl did not stop. The human's blood turned cold. He had thought his crash and his hunger were the worst dangers he faced, but now he understood. This world was not only filled with strange beings, it was ruled by them. The girl turned to him, her red eyes burning brighter than before. "You must go," she whispered urgently. "They come. My family comes." Her words struck him harder than the growl. Family. That meant she was not alone, and if her reaction was any sign, they would not be pleased to find her speaking with a human. He looked at her, unsure whether to run or stay. She seemed torn as well, her expression caught between warning him and holding him there. Then the forest broke open with light and sound. Figures moved fast through the trees, their pale shapes like lightning in the dark. The human's breath caught as he saw 3 more women step into the clearing, their eyes burning brighter than hers, their presence heavier and colder. The girl dropped her gaze, fear flickering across her face. The human realized too late that his joke, his bold words, had been overheard. And in this world, such words carried a price. The human stood frozen as the 3 figures appeared in the clearing. They moved with a grace that was unnatural, their pale skin glowing faintly like carved stone under the moonlight. Their eyes burned red, sharper and colder than the girl's. Each step they took pressed into the ground as though the very earth bent to them. The girl lowered her head, her voice locked in silence as the newcomers circled. The human could feel the weight of their attention pinning him in place, more suffocating than chains. One of them, taller than the rest, let out a sound that was not quite a hiss and not quite a laugh. Her gaze fell on the girl first. "You dared bring him here," she said, her words carrying a sharpness that cut through the air. The girl trembled, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. The taller woman's eyes shifted toward the human, piercing him with such intensity that his breath stalled. He had seen predators before, animals that stalked and killed, but nothing compared to the hunger and anger he saw in her gaze. Another of the sisters stepped closer, her movements quick and precise. Her hair, long and silver, caught the faint light of the forest. She circled the human like a wolf testing prey, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "He dare stand here," she whispered. "He speaks to one of us as if she is his equal. And worse." She leaned closer, her sharp teeth flashing. He promised her a kiss. The words hit him like a blade. His joke, the careless shield he had used against fear, now stood as evidence against him. The sisters' eyes narrowed, their anger no longer hidden. The youngest-looking one let out a sharp laugh that echoed through the trees. "Then let him pay the price. Let his blood be hers and let his body be ours." The human's heart pounded. He wanted to step back, but the ground behind him felt heavy, as though the shadows themselves pushed him forward. The girl who had first spoken to him raised her hand slightly, her face pale with fear. "No," she said in a trembling voice. "He is mine." The clearing fell silent. The sisters stared at her, disbelief flashing in their glowing eyes. The tallest one narrowed her gaze, her voice dripping with cold authority. "Yours?" The word hung like poison in the air. The girl's lips shook, but she did not take her words back. She stepped in front of the human, shielding him with her thin frame. "He spoke to me. He chose me. His words were mine to hear. That makes him mine." The sisters hissed in unison, their voices rising like the screech of broken glass. The human felt his throat tighten, his pulse racing as their fury spread like fire through the forest. He wanted to speak, to deny his part, but something in the girl's trembling defiance kept him silent. The mother arrived then. Her presence was felt before she appeared. The air grew colder, the forest stilled, and even the shadows seemed to retreat. She stepped into the clearing with the grace of a queen. Her eyes glowed brighter than all the others, and her face carried the weight of centuries. Her gaze swept across the scene, falling on her daughters, then on the trembling girl, and finally on the human. For a long moment no one dared move. "What is this?" her voice asked, low and commanding. The sisters quickly bowed their heads, but the girl stood firm, though her body shook. "He is mine," she whispered again, her voice small but steady. The mother's eyes narrowed, and a silence stretched so long that the human thought the earth itself had stopped breathing. Then the mother smiled, and it was not a kind smile. It was sharp, cruel, and filled with something far older than malice. "If he claims you, then let him prove it," she said. Her words fell like a sentence carved in stone. "A human cannot touch one of my daughters and walk free. If he dares to kiss her, then he dares to bind himself to her. Let him face the trials. If he survives, he may call himself her mate. If he fails—" Her gaze locked on him, burning into his soul. "He dies." The sisters grinned, their anger shifting into cruel delight. The girl's eyes widened in shock, her face pale as bone. She turned to the human, her lips trembling with words she could not speak. He stood there, caught between fear and disbelief. A joke had become a sentence. A single careless line had placed him on the edge of life and death. The mother stepped closer, her towering form wrapping the air in coldness. "You have until the next moonrise," she said. "Prepare yourself, human. The trials will not forgive weakness." Her words ended, and with a sweep of her arm, the sisters vanished into the forest, their shapes dissolving into the mist. The clearing grew still once again, though the weight of her command lingered like chains around his neck. The girl finally turned to him, her red eyes filled with sorrow and fear. "You should not have spoken those words," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Now you cannot escape them." The human's chest tightened as he looked into her glowing eyes. He wanted to blame her, to curse the night, to demand his freedom. But deep down something told him it was too late. The path had been chosen, and now it led only deeper into the heart of this strange and dangerous clan. The forest closed around them once more, and in the distance he could hear the faint echo of laughter carried by the night, the laughter of those who knew his fate was already sealed. The forest did not sleep that night. The human sat against a broken tree, his body weak and his mind burning with thoughts he could not silence. The girl had stayed near him, her pale face hidden in the shadows, but she said little. Every time he asked what the trials meant, her lips pressed shut, as if the words themselves were forbidden. Her silence weighed heavier than any answer. He tried to close his eyes, but the whispers of the clan moved through the trees like smoke, reminding him that he was not free. When the first light of the alien moon touched the forest, the girl finally spoke. "They will come for you," she whispered. "You must be ready." Before he could answer, the air shifted. Cold swept through the trees and figures emerged from the mist. The sisters arrived first, their steps soundless, their eyes bright with cruel delight. Behind them came the mother, her presence turning the forest into a graveyard of silence. She lifted her hand and the ground itself seemed to bend to her will. Her voice carried the power of command, sharp and merciless. "Let the trials begin." They dragged him to the edge of a wide clearing where the trees bent inward like walls. The earth was marked with strange symbols that glowed faintly under the moonlight. He could feel heat rising from them, though the air around him was freezing. The sisters surrounded the space, their eyes shining as if they hungered for the sight of his failure. The mother stood beyond them, her face carved with indifference. "First trial," she declared. "Survive the night of illusions." The moment she spoke, the air shifted. The forest dissolved around him, and he stood in a place that was not real but felt solid under his feet. He saw faces from his past, comrades, family, even those who had already died. They called his name, their voices warm, tempting. He knew it was not real, but his heart twisted at the sight of them. He reached out, almost touching, until he heard the faintest whisper from the girl beyond the circle. "Do not believe." Her voice was the only anchor pulling him back. He clenched his fists and forced himself to step away from the false images. The illusions screamed and dissolved into shadows, and the forest returned. The sisters looked displeased, though one of them smirked as if curious about his resistance. The mother raised her hand again. "Second trial. Walk the hunting ground." The ground opened on the far side of the clearing, revealing a path that sank into darkness. The human's body ached, but he stepped forward. The girl's eyes followed him with silent fear, and he carried that memory into the dark. The hunting ground was alive with movement. Strange beasts crept between the trees, their eyes glowing with the same red light as the clan's. They stalked him silently, their breath thick and hot in the air. He picked up a jagged branch, the only weapon he could find. When the first beast lunged, he drove the branch into its side, rolling away as its claws raked the earth. The sound of battle echoed through the ground, and every strike reminded him of how fragile he was. Yet somehow he endured, bloodied but alive, when the path finally opened back into the clearing. The sisters hissed in disappointment, though their eyes flickered with a grudging respect. The mother's face did not change. She raised her hand once more, her voice final. "Third trial. Face the guardian." The earth trembled. From the shadows of the forest emerged a beast larger than any he had seen. Its body was covered in black scales, its mouth filled with jagged teeth. Its eyes glowed brighter than fire, and its roar shook the trees to their roots. The human froze, his body heavy with exhaustion. His branch was nothing against this creature. Yet when he looked up, he saw the girl watching him, her lips trembling as if she prayed silently. That fragile hope pushed him forward. The guardian charged, its claws tearing the ground. He leapt aside, the wind of its strike knocking him down. Pain burned through his body as he scrambled up. He could not defeat it with strength, but he could survive with will. He rolled under its strikes, using the terrain, using speed, never letting it land the killing blow. Each breath felt like his last, but he clung to life with desperate hands. At last, the beast's claw caught on one of the glowing symbols carved into the ground. The light flared, wrapping around the guardian like chains. It roared and twisted, but the magic of the clan held it down. The mother raised her hand, and the beast dissolved into mist. The clearing fell silent. The sisters stared at the human, their expressions unreadable while the girl's eyes filled with something new, something like hope. The mother stepped forward, her face calm, though her voice carried the weight of judgment. You survived. Few humans could. Her eyes narrowed. But survival is not enough. You are bound now. You belong to us. The human's chest tightened at her words. He wanted to fight, to shout, to deny. But the weight of her power pressed against him, stronger than chains, stronger than iron. The girl stepped closer, her pale face filled with fear and longing. Do not give up, she whispered. Not yet. And so he stood there, shaking, bloodied but alive. The trials had not killed him, but he knew deep inside that they had only begun to shape his fate. The forest was quiet after the trials ended, but the silence did not bring peace. The human sat near the edge of the clearing, his arms shaking, his breath shallow, his body covered in cuts and bruises. Every muscle ached, but his mind burned stronger than his wounds. He had survived what no other human could, yet he felt no victory. The trials had not freed him. They had chained him deeper to the clan. He could feel the mother's gaze in his memory, heavy and cold, reminding him that his survival was not his triumph, but hers. The girl came to him as the sisters faded into the mist. She knelt at his side, her pale hand hovering above his wounds but never quite touching. Her eyes glowed faintly, filled with worry she tried to hide. You should not have lived, she whispered. But you did. Now they will never let you go. He wanted to ask her why she cared, why she had looked at him with fear when her own family wanted him destroyed, but the words never formed. The pain of his body drowned his voice. Later that night, when the moon rose high, the sisters returned. Their eyes gleamed in the shadows, sharp with both hate and fascination. One of them, the silver-haired sister, crouched low near him, her smile cruel. You bleed like prey, she said softly, dragging a finger through the dirt near his arm. But you endure like us. Perhaps there is more inside you than weakness. She leaned closer, her breath cold. Or perhaps you only delay your death. Another sister hissed, her red eyes narrowing. He should die now. Mother is blind with old dreams. A human cannot stand among us. The third said nothing, only watching him with an expression he could not read. Her silence made him uneasy, as though she saw something deeper than the others. Their whispers tangled in the air like a net, each word pulling him closer to their trap. The girl stood then, her voice trembling but strong. He is mine. You cannot touch him. Her words cut the silence, and the sisters turned on her with fury. One stepped closer, her face twisted with rage. Yours? You claim him as if you have the right? You are weak. You hide behind his defiance. The girl's red eyes flashed, her jaw tightening. Then call me weak, she said, but I will not give him to you. The air shook with their anger, but before the sisters could strike, the mother appeared once more. She walked into the clearing as if the shadows themselves bent around her. Her presence silenced the forest, even the whispers of the night beasts. She looked at her daughters, then at the human, and her smile returned sharp and endless. He belongs to us all, she said. But the question is not whether he stays. The question is what role he will play. Her words were cold, but her gaze lingered on the human in a way that made his skin crawl. He realized then that he was not a guest, not even a prisoner. He was a piece on their board, a tool they would use for their own purpose. And that purpose, he feared, was bound to the girl who had spoken for him. When the clan left again, the girl finally sat beside him. For a long while she said nothing, only listening to the distant cries of beasts. At last she whispered, They will not let you choose. They will push you until you break, and if you do not break, they will claim you. If you love me, you will not survive. If you survive, you will not love me. Her voice shook with pain, and the human felt the weight of her words press into his chest. He looked at her then, truly looked. Her pale face glowed faintly in the moonlight, her fangs hidden but her eyes full of something fragile. She was both the reason he lived and the reason he was trapped. He wanted to reach for her, but he feared what touch might mean. Was it love or was it surrender? Was it survival or the end of himself? The night stretched long, filled with questions that had no answer. The human wrestled with his own heart, torn between the desire to protect her and the need to free himself. He thought of his home, of the sky he once knew, of the warmth of a sun that did not burn red like her eyes. He wondered if he would ever see it again. But when he closed his eyes, the only image that remained was hers. By dawn, the choice had not become clearer. If anything, it had become darker. The girl had fallen asleep near him, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel the warmth of her closeness, forgetting the cold fate that waited. But as the forest stirred and the shadows thickened once more, he knew the mother would return, and the sisters would not rest until he was bound. It was not only his survival at stake, it was his heart, and one would destroy the other. The night before the last trial was colder than any the human had felt since his crash. The forest pressed against him like a cage, every shadow heavy with unseen eyes. The girl stayed close, her face pale with worry. She tried to warn him, whispering pieces of truth between long silences, but even she did not know what her mother had prepared. Her eyes carried both sorrow and hope, and the human felt the pull of both. He wanted to believe he could fight for her, yet he feared the clan's power was far greater than anything he could endure. When dawn broke, the mother arrived. The sisters followed, their movements sharp and eager, like wolves smelling blood. The clearing had been changed overnight. At its center stood a circle carved into the earth, glowing with symbols that pulsed like a living heart. The mother's voice carried across the clearing, calm but merciless. "Final trial," she said. "You will face the beast of our blood. If you defeat it, you are bound to us. If you fall, your life ends here." The ground shook, and from beneath the circle rose a creature that defied reason. It was larger than any he had seen, its body made of shifting smoke and bone, its claws longer than swords. Its eyes burned red like fire trapped in glass, and its growl shook the trees until leaves rained down around them. The sisters smiled with hunger, and the girl cried out in fear. The human's body trembled, but he stepped forward, knowing there was no escape. The beast lunged, and the earth cracked beneath its weight. The human dove aside, rolling across the dirt, his body screaming with pain. He grabbed a broken spear left near the circle. Though he knew it was useless against such a monster, still he fought, striking at its limbs, dodging its claws, his will pushing him beyond exhaustion. Every moment felt like his last, but each time he rose again, the girl's voice echoed in his memory. "Do not give up." The fight raged until blood soaked his hands and the ground shook with the beast's fury. At last, in a desperate move, he drove the spear into one of the glowing symbols on the earth. The circle flared with blinding light, chains of fire wrapping around the creature, binding it to the ground. The beast roared, twisting, but the magic held. The human fell to his knees, too weak to rise but alive. Silence followed, heavy and cold. The sisters stared with wide eyes, their cruel smiles gone. The girl rushed forward, her hands trembling as she reached for him but dared not touch. The mother stepped into the circle, her face calm, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. She looked down at the human, her voice carrying the weight of a verdict. "You have done what no other could. You have endured. You are no longer prey. You are ours." The words struck him like chains. The girl's eyes filled with tears, her lips parting to speak. But the mother silenced her with a glance. "He chose with his words, and now he has chosen with his survival. He belongs to you, but through you he belongs to us all." The human's chest tightened. He thought of freedom, of escape, of the sky beyond this cursed forest. But when he looked into the girl's eyes, he saw the truth. He had no path back. His careless words, his stubborn survival had bound him here. The girl whispered through her tears, "Do you regret what you said?" He wanted to answer, to say yes, to break free from the fate that tied him to them. But the words never came. Instead, he looked at her, her fragile strength, her sorrow mixed with hope. And he knew there was no turning away. He had stepped into their world, and now it held him. The sisters whispered among themselves, their voices sharp, plotting what his presence would mean. The girl clutched her hands close to her chest as if afraid her family would see her heart. The mother only smiled, her eyes filled with the satisfaction of victory. As the forest closed around them, the human realized his survival had not freed him. It had trapped him in a bond deeper than death. He was alive, but he no longer lived for himself. He lived for her, for the clan, for the promise he had spoken in fear but sealed in blood. The night returned with laughter drifting through the trees. It was the laughter of those who had won and the echo of his own choice. His fate was sealed,